Same dude, different day. Chapter 6. Are we compatible or codependent? The relationships in my life were yielding several unfavorable results, and it was time that I got myself in alignment. Finding a gig was at the top of my list because my bank account was in the red. My emergency fund had sent out several distress signals, and I was about $100 shy of poverty. Something needed to change soon, or I would be loading up my recently financed Hyundai and headed back to the Midwest. I cringed at the thought of crawling back with my fast tail in between my legs. The humiliation from my previous relationship had already rocked me to my core. I couldn't fathom going back to the very place that I was running away from. The idea of a failed relationship and a failed relocation was almost unbearable. I had to pick a struggle. It had to be one or the other, but I wouldn't allow it to be both. I pushed my feelings to the side as I have always done and started to devise a plan on how to dig myself out of that financial pit. Note to self, get an unbiased opinion. After a couple of minutes of brainstorming, I decided that I would reach out to a recruiting agency to help me win interviews. Apparently, my ability to market myself was subpar, so I decided to solicit help. The agency matched me with a sophisticated Black woman in her early 40s. Sis was about her business. She did not play games when it came to her work. She carried herself in such a way that exuded excellence. Her confidence stepped into the room before she did, and I can tell I was in good hands. The recruiter was very thorough. She analyzed my resume with a red pen, and by the time she gave it back to me, it looked like it had been through open heart surgery. Her recommendations severely improved my resume and made me look like a very attractive candidate. Within a week, I had several interviews and landed a position at one of the top HBCUs in the country. The job came right on time because my bank account was on its last leg. The HBCU was in dire need of additional help in their accounting department, so I was able to start immediately. With a grateful heart, I showed up to work eager to get started and dressed to impress. My plan was to show my manager that she made a good choice, but I also came cute because I was trying to get me another dude on the roster to replace Isaac. This particular college was known for producing very successful Black men, and I just knew one of them had to have my name on him. After Isaac and I air quote broke up, I should have taken some time to be alone. But I was ready to dive back in that dating pool, head first, no life jacket, and without the proper lessons on how to navigate the waves of life. Unfortunately, my experiences with the men at the HBCU didn't quite go the way I saw them going in my head. There were some gorgeous guys at my new place of employment, but they seemed a little bit more interested in my shoes than they were me. Refusing to go through that Xavier experience again, I steered clear of all the men in the office. But I wasn't tripping because I still had a couple of non-eligible bachelors on deck who were ready and willing to continuously waste my time. It was a blessing in disguise that my job failed to add any additional men to my already drama-filled life. Courtney and Q were already a handful, so searching for a new dude was truly unnecessary. Note to self, there's a thin line between compatibility and codependency. Courtney and I have been entertaining each other on a more regular basis ever since I woke up next to him on that eventful New Year's Eve night. Previously, I had put together a master plan to get rid of him by a certain expiration date. With the recent departure of Isaac, though, my affection meter was running on empty and I was in desperate need of a refill. I tried to steer clear from Courtney, especially since I had promised myself for the umpteenth time that I would never get close enough to a man and allow him to play me. Yet, something about his spirit continued to draw me to him. Somewhere between our vow of non-commitment, we became somewhat codependent on one another. I hardly ignored his calls as often as I did before. In fact, there were a couple of days when I was actually looking forward to hearing from him. Our proximity became dangerous. The sex was on point, but somewhere along the lines, I actually started enjoying his company too. The more time we spent together, the more he opened up to me. He told me about how he was husky and homely looking when he was younger. I would have never been able to guess that by looking at this handsome, well-groomed man that stood before me. The washboard stomach, the broad shoulders, and the long, professionally twisted locks accompany his 6-foot stature. There's no way he had ever been fat or unfortunate looking. I found myself empathizing with him as he told his story, though, because I too grew up as an ugly duckling. Our childhood insecurities brought us closer together, all while tearing us further apart. Although we had both grown up to be very attractive individuals, we both still saw ourselves as the ugly friend that no one wanted to date. When Courtney caught wind that I had been seeing other people, he set out on a quest to let me know that he had hoes too. He posted pictures of himself with other girls and even flirted with some right in front of me. One evening, he intentionally invited me to a gathering with some of his friends, then disappeared in the back room with some random chick. And I ain't gonna lie, I was a little bit salty because I knew the stuff that he was doing to me, he was doing to her too, and I ain't like that. But then later on, he called me as if nothing happened, and I played along acting like I was completely unbothered, although I was. I pretended his actions had little to no effect on me because I could go out and snag other guys if I wanted to as well. Now, keeping them was a different story, but I convinced myself to remove all feelings from this situation because he was grown and single. Therefore, what he chose to do and with whom he chose to do it with was none of my concern. Additionally, from where I stood, the ladies he had chosen, no competition. Normally, I'm not the one for games, but when I do decide to play, I rarely play fair. While he paraded numerous insignificant females around me, I, in return, went straight for the jugular. I took the extra petty step of being very flirty with one of his friends. I never let his friend hit, but I made Courtney believe that he did just to get under his skin. Was it childish? Yep. But did I care? Nope. If he thought that I was just going to sit there and let him make me look stupid, he was messing with the wrong one. Anything he could do, I could do better. Or worse, depending on how you looked at it. We were both adolescents living in grown folks' bodies, doing grown folks' things, and making grown folks' mistakes. We were both broken, so there's no way we would have ever worked out. We were using our trauma bond as glue to hold our dysfunctional relationship together, but as time went on, our union began to deteriorate. The closer we became, the more evident it was that we couldn't handle what was happening between us. Instead of fully embracing our feelings for one another, we rejected them, which caused a multitude of friction and unhealthy displays of affection. One day I got super sick at work and I left early. I rushed home to what would be an intimate relationship with my toilet. Several trips to the bathroom and multiple swigs of Pepto-Bismol later, I passed out in my bedroom with the light shining brightly on my despair. Courtney had hit me up a few times while I was asleep. After several unreturned calls and texts, he decided to pull up. The light in my bedroom was still on, and I believe Jada came to check on me at the exact moment he rode past our apartment. I guess he was salty that he saw shadows in my bedroom. He thought that I was purposely annoying him when truly I was just sick to my stomach. I woke up the next day to an abundance of disgruntled texts and voicemails. His expiration date was renewed shortly after that incident. Our faux love story had gone on long enough, and there was no fairy tale ending in sight. Note to self: don't cause a scene, just leave. Being promiscuous had its pros and cons. Yes, my reputation was now in the garbage, but I had learned how to think and act like men, which was somewhat beneficial. One thing that I had learned from the men I dated was to never overcomplicate ending a relationship. When dudes are done, they're just done. So this time, I was going to take a page from the Manipulator Handbook and just end all communication. Just like Isaac had stopped calling me when he no longer wanted to date me, I'd deploy the same strategy on Courtney. As immature as it sounded, I was comfortable with that plan of action. Courtney, however, was not. He called, text, DM, and I could have sworn I seen a carrier pigeon on my stoop one day. All of his messages went unanswered until one day he ran up on me at our local grocery store. I had originally stopped by the supermarket to shop for some items to meal prep for that week, but nothing could have prepped nor prepared me for that conversation. I was nervous. My mouth was all dry and my palms were sweating. What was he going to say? Was he going to cuss me out and make a huge scene in the avocado aisle? I didn't really know. I tried to walk away, but he cornered me and made me face him. I don't remember the whole conversation because my mind was going a mile per minute. I do remember him not raising his voice because he still cared about me. But he did let me know that he was sick of my BS and he wouldn't be putting up with it any longer. Stubbornly, I remained silent, desperately trying to maintain my savage demeanor. Courtney knew me well enough to know I wasn't going to argue with him. So he took one last look at me, shook his head, and just left. Rightfully so. I was sick of myself as well, but I was unwilling to take the necessary steps to get it together. Note to self: sending in your representative always backfires. Immediately, I was reminded of the recruiter that I had hired to update my resume. The content of my resume was basically the same, but she finessed it in a way to make me look more competitive. Had I been doing the same thing in my encounters with men? Had I been introducing people to my representative, then bamboozling them with my split personalities after they got hooked? I sat down and had a conversation with all my personalities, and we agreed that therapy was now necessary. Instead of getting help, I dug further into my bag of dysfunction and pulled out a plan to get Courtney back on my team. Several glasses of wine later, I headed upstairs to take a thorough shower in preparation for the night's activities. Determined to give Courtney a reason to stay, I also exfoliated my hands and my lips to ensure a soft yet satisfying experience. My dress was sexy enough to entice but also provided easy access. I headed straight to Courtney's house, intended to give him what I thought would make everything go back to normal. Though I didn't allow myself to verbalize my feelings in the grocery store, I had planned to physically express myself as soon as I saw him. When I arrived at his doorstep, he didn't immediately answer the way that he used to. I stood on the other side, full of emotion but lacking the words to express it. "Let me in," I whispered. But the volume of the television continually increased and drowned out my pleas. Note to self, take your L like a G. This fool didn't even open up the door. I was salty, but I deserved that type of treatment. It was probably for the best though, because our courtship would have led to nothing but trouble. Crushed by the rejection I had just received, I hopped in my Hyundai that I could barely afford and sped out of his parking lot. My car and my mind were going about 85 miles per hour as I hopped onto 85 South. It seemed as though Courtney's sensitivity had now transferred to me, and I almost shed a tear. Almost. I forfeited all emotions in that moment. Determined to take my L like a G, I continued down the highway to a risky location. As I parked my car in front of Q's uncle's house, I contemplated driving back home. Q was trouble, and I knew it. I had purposely avoided having sex with him because I knew he would ruin me. I had been able to navigate his playboy ways by refusing sexual encounters, but that night everything would change. I needed to feel wanted. Courtney's dismissal of me caused my desperation to move into overdrive. As soon as Q opened the door, I attacked him, ripping off all of his clothes and kissing him because I was determined to feel better. For some reason, though, he tried to slow me down. I briefly remember him murmuring about needing to tell me something, but I proceeded to seduce him. Whatever he needed to tell me would have to wait until later. I whispered something nasty in his ear and proceeded to kiss his neck and unzip his pants. He struggled to continue to tell me his secret as I persisted on distracting him. Finally, he was completely surrounded by my energy and we were both instantly addicted. Q fell asleep immediately after our wonderful encounter. He temporarily made me forget about what's his name. Soon I was able to doze off too. The smell of fried chicken and waffles woke me up the next morning. After I gargled with his off-brand mouthwash, I headed downstairs to help with breakfast. We ate and reminisced on last night's festivities, both blushing a little bit while we were going over the footage. I was about to recommend that we go for round two, but I noticed Q's facial expression had changed. He looked like he had swallowed a chicken bone. Or maybe he had to pass gas or even take a full poop. Either way, I knew whatever came next would put a halt on round two. "So remember last night I told you I need to tell you something?" he said. My mind was racing. His gun was on the kitchen table. Had he killed somebody before I came over? Was the popo about to bust in his apartment with bulletproof vests and Uzis? So now I'm thinking about how to escape because I definitely can't go to jail. My mind always goes 100% left when someone says, "I need to tell you something." Those were the exact words I saw in my DM from old girl before she revealed to me that Xavier was living a double life. I hated those words with a passion. I took a big gulp and then said, vaguely, "Why, what's up?" "Nikki's pregnant," he blurted out. Q had never really been one to beat around the bush, even though I wish he did at this very moment. His honesty was one thing I loved and loathed most about him. Nikki, as well as a few others, were a part of his whole rotation. Her name always stood out, though, because I remember him telling me that she bought him clothes and gave him money. Together we would clown her, calling her stupid, desperate, and several other demeaning names. Even though I participated in laughing at her, I knew the real reason she was willing to financially support this dude. She was hypnotized by the legend. His effect on her was the very reason I never wanted to sleep with him in the first place. Now that I had experienced the legend for myself, I understood why she was tripping. Even though I could relate to her, I still didn't want to share. That was my dilemma. A range of unhealthy emotions flowed through my body as I sat there trying to properly dissect the information that was just provided to me. The pure bliss that we experienced just a few hours ago was now overshadowed by a sprinkle of saltiness and a dash of future baby mama drama. Those ingredients would definitely create a flavorless recipe. I wanted no parts of it. He mentioned something about wanting to be the father he never had and how he didn't want to lose me and blah, blah, blah. But his words seemed to float out of his mouth and disappear into thin air. I couldn't concentrate. Being rejected twice in less than 24 hours was an extremely humbling experience. Whoever said the best way to get over an old man is to get under a new one is a certified liar and can't be trusted. Note to self: stop letting loneliness choose your lover. My self esteem was on life support. I left Q's house that afternoon feeling completely defeated. The unholy trinity had dismantled right before my eyes. First, Isaac pushed me away, and in return, I pushed Courtney away. Now, Q's baby mama will be pushing out his jughead seed in just a couple of months. Deep down, I knew that none of these relationships had the potential to last, but I let the fear of being alone convince me otherwise. That always happened when I let loneliness choose my lover. With my lack of confidence guiding all my decisions, I had become comfortable with believing that receiving the silver medal of love was better than receiving no medal at all. As much as I complained about men and all the drama that comes with them, it was nobody's fault but my own that I ended up in a cycle of toxic relationships. Determined to change the narrative, I began to detox my life of all the toxic habits and people I had previously welcomed. The first thing I did was go on a blocking spree. Blocking people's access to me was my favorite pastime, so Courtney and Q now joined Tobias and Isaac in the abyss of blocked numbers in my phone. Next, I started working out again to rid myself of the excess pounds and stress that had been accumulated during my dating journey. I had successfully gone from looking like a snack to a cheat meal. I couldn't understand how I was gaining relationship weight because I wasn't in a real relationship. Lastly, I decided to start visiting churches again. I hope that making all those adjustments will put my life back on the right track.